Charlie, it's yours.
It's my pleasure to introduce our final speaker for today, Brian Munsky. Brian, please tell us about your living histories.
Thank you, Charlie, and thank you, Sri, so much for this opportunity. I just want to thank you all for sharing and listening to these stories. Hi, I'm Brian Munsky. I'm straight, white, cisgendered, heterosexual, and I want to talk today about how toxic masculinity nearly ruined my life and how a feminist view of community has been my salvation. If my slides will advance. Okay, I grew up in a small town called South Park, one of the more rural suburbs of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My great-grandfather, Frank Munsky, was an immigrant who was orphaned in Pittsburgh. He never knew his real last name, so he chose the name Munsky because it was easy to spell. My other ancestors were also recent immigrant farmers and laborers, mostly from Eastern Europe. Back then, Pittsburgh was a very important city, birthplace of Andrew Carnegie's massive empire of steel. Pittsburgh was also the epicenter for unionization of American workers. The Amalgamated Association of Iron and Steel Workers started there. Organized labor led to better pay, safer conditions, less child labor, medical insurance, and improved equality. My great-grandfather, Frank Munsky, wasn't a steelworker, but he was a laborer for the Pittsburgh Press, the main newspaper in a very wealthy city. And he was a member of the Communications Workers of America Union, so he made a pretty good living. My grandfather, Frank Munsky, and my father, Frank Munsky, worked in the same union for their entire working lives. So did my uncle Chuck Munsky and my older brother, Frank Munsky IV. Pittsburgh was also, where are we? I forgot I had some images. Okay, skip that. So as the sixth male Munsky of all time, I assumed I would be following in their footsteps. My first job was a paper boy, but that future was rapidly dimming. In the 60s, jobs diminished rapidly when industrialists realized that they could evade fair labor practices by offshoring jobs to exploit foreign workers. When I was born in 1978, the population of Pittsburgh was well on its way to decimating its population by a whole half. At the same time, conservative campaigns and radio talk shows like Rush Limbaugh, who got his career start just 11 miles from my house, were pushing a lie that immigrants were responsible for this decline, thus gaslighting workers to absolve corporate greed. So I grew up immersed in this racist, anti-immigrant, misogynist, homophobic, anti-Semitic, Islamophobic, ableist, classist, and anti-intellectual propaganda. The cruel ideas, concepts, and jokes that I personally parroted back to others still keep me awake at night today. Elementary school was a very mixed experience for me. I had a visual impairment that made it very difficult to interpret the orientation or orders of letters. B's and D's were indistinguishable for me, as were P's and Q's. I was relatively slow learning to read and write, and at times common letter pairs, A, E, I, E, O, U, they're still a little difficult for me to write when lecturing on a whiteboard. I also couldn't remember to bring things with me when I went to school. Countless times, I forgot my lunch money, and I was too scared to ask for a loan. So I would go hungry. I had to borrow a pencil almost every day in elementary school. And I had to read upside down from other students' textbooks, which probably wasn't really helping with the dyslexia. By fourth grade, I forgot my homework so often that I eventually stopped doing it at all. There was no point, and I started to rebel. I still really wanted to impress my family, and Pittsburgh is a sports town. So that was the best way to my family's heart. My passion was soccer. I practiced every day. I made the varsity team as a freshman, started as a sophomore, and as a junior, I was recognized as one of the top defenders in Western Pennsylvania. Through soccer, I learned to work hard, to enjoy challenges, to accept and learn from failure, and to appreciate teamwork. Also, soccer kept me in school and kept me away from selling drugs with my friends. But through sports, I was also saturated in violence. I was sexually humiliated. I was sexually humiliated in front of my soccer team. A brutal swim team initiation rite led to the permanent loss of motion in my right index finger. And at that time, I would never complain. I thought that was normal. I thought that others always had it worse. My dream was to play college soccer. A recruiter contacted colleges on my behalf. It was amazing. I got brochures from dozens of schools. Coaches had waived application fees, the whole deal. But then at a club tournament, I broke my leg really badly. I couldn't play my senior year, and I never heard from the recruiter or any of the college coaches again. I escaped into science fiction. No longer able to play soccer, I joined the drama club and student government. Although I didn't know to look for a new community who rejected the systemic racism and sexism, but who also accepted me and my many flaws in my past history. They taught me that violence wasn't an absolute. If not for them, I don't think I would have gone to college. Well, that one animation is going to take a bit. I'll skip the books. It was only after I only applied to one school, Penn State. I couldn't afford an application for fees for other. Luckily, I was accepted. My writing skills won me a partial academic scholarship. Moreover, back in the 1990s, public schools were more affordable, costing only half of what they do now. Thanks to healthy affirmative action programs, income-based grants and subsidized loans would cover the rest of my tuition and housing. I didn't even have to work except over the summers. I started in the Schreier's Honors College within Penn State as an undeclared liberal arts and science major. I wanted to be a science fiction writer. It was the only job I knew could combine my love for writing and my talent for math. I had never met a working scientist or engineer or a PhD holder, so college started off a bit rocky for me. I failed my very first calculus test and barely passed my first physics test. I had to learn how to do homework, how to study, and how to ask for help. I did well in English, but under financial pressure, I believed I'd never be good enough to make it as a writer. So I took an engineering. Dr. Christine Masters inspired me through a mechanics and dynamics course. I absolutely loved it. I think I did every single problem in the textbook. It was an epiphany. I learned that creativity wasn't restricted to the arts, but it could also be combined with math and applied to technology. I decided I wanted to be an engineer, but because I missed the freshman introduction courses, I knew nothing about it when I went to declare a major. I chose aerospace entirely at random. It was the most relevant to sci-fi novels that I had read at the time. But the department was amazing and welcoming. After my first structures class, Dr. Ed Smith here hired me as an undergrad researcher to work on piezoelectric tubes. Lab work was okay, but computation was awesome for me. And after my second structures course, Dr. Farhan Gandhi, shown here, hired me to build models for other smart materials. I stayed for an MS to study the noise caused by helicopters. I loved the computational modeling and the control theory, but I wasn't excited by helicopters or any other technology that was restricted to warfare and for ferrying around the obscenely wealthy. So after my master's degree in summer 2002, my partner and I packed everything we owned into a single Ford Escort, and we drove out of town. We kept driving, hiking, camping for several months. As winter set in, we stopped in Eugene, Oregon. We applied to colleges, but neither of us could find any work. By March, we'd run entirely out of money. We had to break our lease, and we were back living in the car off Lipton noodles for another several months until we could move into our student dorms. I interviewed for graduate school in mechanical engineering at the Department of UC Santa Barbara. Beautiful place. I fell in love at once. I was meeting with a potential advisor in a building. Oh no, I forget where it is. This is a new map. And as I was interviewing, I saw dolphins just off the coast. I joined Mustafa Kamash's lab. He inspired me because I read a paper of his and Hannah El Samad's in which they used control theory to try to understand calcium homeostasis in cows. What a simple and elegant use of mathematical tools that I knew everything about. It was fascinating. At Santa Barbara, I worked with a great number of people. With David Lowe, we built a stochastic model to understand how noise could control expression of pili, these small hair-like organs on some E. coli. And this fascinating story, which we still have never published, is what led to our discoveries of solutions for the chemical master equation and the solutions of random chemical kinetics. I also worked with a bunch of other amazing researchers there at Santa Barbara. After graduate school, I took a postdoc at Los Alamos National Lab with Ilya Nemenman and other physicists and computational scientists. Their main contribution, from my perspective, was to build the community of QBio, which was transformative for myself and for many others. In particular, Ilya, Bill Havacek, Yi Zhang, Mike Wall, and Jim Fader made the QBio conference in summer school in 2007. That's what brought me to Los Alamos in the first place. Through QBio and LANL, I met hundreds of fantastic collaborators, some of whom are shown here. I took over QBio when Ilya left for Emory. Since then, nearly 1,000 students have come through the QBio program, and scores of graduate students, postdocs, and faculties have contributed as lecturers. I wish I had photos to show everybody all the beautiful people who have contributed to this community, and I wish I had more time to talk about all the great work that I've done. I wish I had some time to talk about my actual research, and you can read about that in my papers. But I do want to circle back in the last minute that I have to my roots in a union family and to my roots as a member of a soccer team. My most important contribution so far has not been my research, but it is the community voices that I have had the pleasure and honor to amplify. My proudest two contributions are, first, the community-written QBio textbook, which is 30 chapters contributed by 75 authors, most of whom are former QBio students. And second, the undergraduate quantitative biology summer school that offers online materials for students to learn how to do image processing and modeling as applied to single-cell biology. In conclusion, I believe that community is everything. It's how we make progress, not just in science, but in society in general. It's how we fight injustice. And along that line, I really want to finish by thanking you, Sri and Charlie, for doing this amazing critical work to help strengthen our community. Thank you.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much, Brian. On behalf of the whole team, thank you very much for the kind words and for a relentlessly inspiring talk. Uh, sorry, Charlie, it's yours. I'll turn it back to you. My bad. But I have burning questions too. I'll send them via chat.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. So I guess I'll start with one question here. On the topic of toxic masculinity, what are your thoughts on ways that more men can be involved in addressing this problem within academia?
I think we need examples of people who are willing to come out and tell their stories. And it's hard to do. Oh my goodness, is it hard to do? But the more we can encourage those that are able to come out, to come forward, to speak out, we find that others have similar stories. And I think that's really where the best chance for making progress is by empowering those that are able to speak. And it's hard. And I certainly didn't think it would be this hard. But if we empower them, then we can learn to get stronger as well. That's why I was so excited about James' talk earlier today, talking about having to hide himself as a homosexual man in science. But he's talking about it. And as we see others that are talking about it, then we feel more comfortable talking about it ourselves. And the more people that talk about these issues, the more likely others will, jump on and join in that. I will say that, at least in my experience, the whole pain of toxic masculinity, it's affecting so many people, right? White men who would never know that that something is happening to them. They don't know that it's being pushed upon them. That's what makes me so sad. I wasn't sad about the things that occurred to me when I was a member of the soccer team or when the swim team, essentially tore my tendon out of my hand and then put me naked into a toilet. But they did it, and I thought that was normal. I didn't even tell my parents about it at the time, right? But the more we talk about it and let people know that these are the things that are happening, the more that we are able to combat those atrocities. I hope that answers some question. I might have lost track.
Yes, it does. Yes, and yeah, thank you for being that role model and voice. We have another question from the audience. So Brian, how did you manage to see past your upbringing and background and make the transformation to the person you are today?
I'd like to say it was intentional. It was not. It was serendipity. I was at I was kind of at the misfit table at lunch as a freshman and sophomore. I sat basically at the table where everybody came to buy drugs from the other misfits. They were actually good people. I really liked those people. They were not the toxic masculine group, but they had to make some money. The In my junior year, I sat with just a group of older women, older girl students in the class who knew me from my brother, and then they just started talking with me and treating me like actual person, not a person to be afraid of, and not a person that I should be trying to overpower or anything like that. They just talked about art, and they talked about rebelling against society as opposed to rebelling against myself, or rebelling or fighting with my peers. It was just pure dumb luck that they took the time to talk with me I guess it was an impressionable age, and really got me into the idea of resistance, of feminist resistance. They didn't use those terms, and I don't think I ever heard the term toxic masculinity until long after that. But they really helped me to see that the violence that I was being subjected to wasn't, what wasn't normal. It wasn't the only way that things could be. And they encouraged me to get involved in writing, right? So they would read it started pretty bad poetry. They would write, and they would really help me to get it better, to make my voice better. And that really helped me. And then later in grad and as an undergrad, I got heavily involved in some of the feminist and queer organizations. So back in the 90s, pride marches and the Take Back the Night marches. And just, the first few times I heard the stories that others were saying, I didn't even believe them, even though I had experienced some of it myself. But over time, after hearing more and more courageous people tell their stories, that's what helped me to change a bit. But I think
Great,
it was lucky. I sat down at the right lunch table.
great. Thank you. Thank you. And we have one more question for you. In a strongly kiss up, kick down system as academia can be, how did you live out your values while also surviving the system?
Um, I think I've been very fortunate. I will say that I was very deliberate when I chose where I would take my academic position after going to Los Alamos. When I interviewed, that was the number one consideration well, there were two. That was one of the two top considerations on which department I would choose. I was going to choose the department where people were the most welcoming, the most kind, and that appeared to be the most accepting of others, however those people would be. And I learned that by asking the students. I learned that by asking the faculty. So I chose CSU because it was such a welcoming place. Also, it's a beautiful place, and I was able to live close enough that I could bike to work. But yeah, for me, I chose my community, not my career. I, in order, and I've always focused on my next move has always been trying to go to the place that was going to make me happiest, not the place that was going to make me the most successful. And I think I did a good job because I've got an awesome department here.
Great. Thank you for your answers, and thank you again for a very inspiring talk. And I'll pass it
Thank you
back
for
to
that.
Sri now.